Hey everybody, this is Gary VaynerChuck, and this is episode 320 of the Ask Gary V Show. And this is a very exciting episode because the person that will be dialing the questions and getting to the questions today is India, our very own India, who's on her last day after 7 years at VaynerMedia, moving to Portland. So everybody in Portland, if you see her, stop her, take a selfie, post it on social, tag me. But fun fact for a lot of you that don't know, India was a superstar. You know how sometimes how Ari Gold actually became the star of Entourage, but that wasn't the purpose. There was absolutely a time in 2016 where India was my main co-host of the show when it was a completely call-in show or take questions from the internet show. And the reason I had to get her off the show was it became clear to me that she had become bigger than me, and I wasn't really willing to deal with that, has just been an amazing part of our team, and I love her very much, and it's fun to have you here. What was the first do you know the first episode you were on?
I think it was like number 20 or something.
20?
Yeah.
It's amazing. So it's fun to have you here. For all the new cats, go back and watch some of those shows like episode 30 to 200 or 150, and you'll see a bunch of India and I interactions. It's a lot of fun, so thanks for being on. Also exciting, we have the marketing firepower behind NASCAR, an organization that we've, at the VaynerX level, have worked with a little bit, but more importantly, just my love of sports and marketing. I'm always looking for guests that make that cross. So it's super excited to have you guys here. Why don't you guys introduce yourselves to the Vayner Nation? And before you do that, put in your phone numbers on YouTube and Facebook if you want to call in and ask questions. I'm going to go pretty question heavy here, especially if you're into sports marketing, into NASCAR itself, or marketing itself as you start listening to the framework. Ladies first.
Thank you. I'm Jill Gregory. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at NASCAR. I've been at NASCAR. Steve Phelps here hired me 10 plus years ago. Big fan of the sport, but was not growing up. And I think the potential that we've got at NASCAR to keep growing is huge. So thanks for having us.
Of course, Jill.
And I'm Steve Phelps. I'm the president of NASCAR. And I've been with NASCAR almost 14 years. I think 14 years next week. I did grow up a NASCAR fan. Worked at the NFL for almost 14 years and then transitioned over to NASCAR. And it's a phenomenal place to work and a great sport. Let's
lean into this because I think for everybody's watching, to make a connection point with the Vayner Nation and you guys, I'm obsessed. My whole last decade of my career is to build a machine, this marketing communications machine, to buy nostalgic businesses and brands. And what's been really fun being 43 and loving sports is there's been incredible patterns in NASCAR, in culture, as a net sport over the last 50 years for that matter. I want to go into that origin story. Where did you grow up, and why were you a NASCAR fan?
Sure. So I grew up in Vermont. I see on India's book there, we got the Vermont sticker. Thank you for
Those
that.
Are such hippies.
There's
hippies.
There are not a lot of us there. So
hold on, I apologize. India, why do you have a Vermont sticker?
I lived there for 4 years. I lived in Bennington, Vermont when I was in college.
God damn it, I forgot that. Okay.
College. I grew up in Burlington, Vermont.
Yep.
So my dad was a big NASCAR fan. There was a track about 15 miles from our house, which is no longer there, called Catamount Speedway.
Oh, Catamount.
And so I went there the first time when I was 5 years old, my brother and my dad, and my father was nice enough to tell me, you are absolutely have to root for the Vermont drivers. No one from New York, no one from Quebec. You have to root for the Vermont
No mass
drivers.
holes?
No.
And so who was your favorite driver?
Yeah, my favorite driver at 5 was the driver of the number 5, white number 5, because it was Speed Racer. Unfortunately, he was from Quebec, and so my dad forbid me for rooting for that driver. His name was Cabana.
Steve, you know what's super interesting about this? Me and Mickey just smiled. Like, a lot of people, even this just a couple of days ago, always ask me, why do I put up number 5 when I take photos with people? Like, I actually, when I chose the Jets as my favorite team at 5, my favorite player was Pat Leahy, the kicker,
Sure.
who wore number 5.
Yeah.
And to this day, everything, like, 5 is a very, it's funny that you were that age when that's wild.
Right.
That's funny.
Yeah.
So
well,
go ahead.
I'm the 5th president of NASCAR, so maybe there's a 5
wow.
connection.
Wow.
Yeah, I like that.
So
Numbers
anyway,
game. Anyway, fun facts.
But yeah, so I NASCAR, like most sports, very generational transfer. So I started with going to the racetrack and the sights and the smells and the sounds of what it's like to go to a NASCAR track. It was a short track, as I said, doesn't exist anymore there, but that was my first love of the sport, and it grew, and so I ebbed and flowed a little bit. When I got into college, I really got back into it, and then got in the kind of the sports world. And I remember a time when Paul Tagliabue, who was the commissioner
Yes.
when I was there, he brought me up and he said, "Hey, I hear you're our resident NASCAR expert," and I gave him a tutorial on NASCAR, so it was pretty cool.
That's rad. And how about for you? You come into the role were you CMO right away 10 or 11 years ago, or first in marketing, grew up within it?
Yeah, no, we created a group when I first started NASCAR designed to, this was, like I said, quite a few years ago, but it was designed to help the drivers with their brands. And so prior to us creating that group, and it was probably a very primitive version of what we all do today, but it's trying to get these drivers to understand that it's not just about what they did on the racetrack, because I think their whole mindset was, I get in the car, I go fast, and I go home, I sign a couple autographs, and I call it a day. And obviously today, what they do in the car is almost secondary. I mean, you got to win on the track, and you've got to be a competitor. But the things that they do on social, engaging with fans, is
sponsor events,
way more important than it used to be. So we started that. That's when I joined NASCAR, just a 3-person team, and now it's grown into kind of our entire marketing organization is built on those driver brands.
For everybody who's listening, knowing the sport, what is a good 3-minute rant on like the current state of NASCAR for people that are considering it or watching it, or give me a little 3 minutes on the current state of the sport.
You want me to rant?
Go ahead,
I
rant.
You can. So I would say, we had this period of time over the last 3 or 4 years where I would say 5 or 6 of our most popular drivers retired. And so when that happens, we knew we had to refresh the kind of the driver base.
Yeah, it's funny
and the
for
fan
everybody
base.
who's listening, knowing what we talk a lot about. It happened to the NBA after the Jordan, Bird Magic thing. My favorite comp for this is wrestling, since Vince McMahon controls the narrative, but it still comes down to the actors and the athletes. And so after Hogan and Macho Man and Andre Giant, there's a gap, and then The Rock and Stone Cold come along, and it reboots. And so you guys,
Same thing for us. Yeah. So we had
Junior.
Junior, Tony Stewart, Jeff Gordon, Carl Edwards, Danica Patrick. Those are big names in our sport, and many had been around for 2 decades. And so for us, like any other brand, any other sport, you refresh the brand.
Yes.
So we've got a phenomenal group of young drivers. This crop is both the largest in the skills, the personalities, the authenticity of who they are. And the great news is they can win. And you can have a great personality, be very charismatic. Our fans want the drivers to win.
Yeah,
it
the
helps
history,
develop their,
this is a debate and pontificating that I have with you guys. And this is just, so everybody's listening, my incredible observation of the next 20, 30 years is that the direct social scale does, for the first time ever, create a debate of winning on the field being a direct attribute, because I do think that we're going to be able to see 360, no different than people are vloggers and influencers and they're not winning anything. Can America or the world become fascinated by a human just based on their backstory, their life story?
Right.
By the way, you're talking to a sports fan who actually drops his teams when they win. I stopped being a Yankee fan and Rangers fan after the Rangers won in '94 and the Yankees won in '96. So I'm in it for the climb. If I got behind a racer, I'd probably, young, who was, I'd probably love the 2 or 3 or 4 years.
You want the underdog.
I want the process of trying to win more so than the winner. But nonetheless, to your point, winning has always been the variable for max popularity. But you guys have a pedigree sport. One thing that's interesting about you guys, the Elliott kid now, Dale Jr., I remember watching that very carefully, like as a casual fan, just knowing.
Right.
When you are a second generation of an icon, you definitely have a pretty big fan base before you've won, which I always feel super compassionate and empathetic towards that kid, because the pressure's impossible.
Well, you look at Dale Jr. early in his career, and I think part of why he has transformed into such a great media personality is that, early on, you have to think that pressure was a lot for him to handle. And I think as he continued to get older, and then even now when he's in the booth broadcasting races, he's much more comfortable with kind of his role and his legacy, and you can see that in kind of how he interacts.
Yeah, it's a tough beast. I mean, Petty's kid raced, right?
Yeah.
You know, like, and like not as successfully of a career. Like it's tough.
Yeah.
Well, it's tough. You know, Richard Petty, the king. You know, it's no one's gonna. That's a level.
Have
that's
you met the
difficult to
king?
get to. So
Yeah,
it's just.
I'm not. I'd love to.
We need to make that happen.
What was he,
he's awesome.
43?
43.
See to me, like, that's interesting. The fact that I know that, like, just speaks to like how much of an impact he had on culture. Like, yeah, I mean, listen, anytime your dad is known in anything as the fucking king, you're in deep shit. Let's just get to the punchline. Like, that's going to be a problem. Bad news, Xander. Marketing is going to be tough for you. I'm kidding, Dustin. All right, let's keep going.
I think the interesting thing, too, so you talk about these, you know, young stars that we have and authentic and charismatic. You take the guy who currently runs for Richard Petty Motorsports, Bubba Wallace, African-American kid, phenomenal personality.
Yes.
And, you know, not afraid to show his emotions.
No.
Not afraid. I mean, he's funny. He's just a cool guy.
Want to get some nerdy ones in.
And then you've got, you know, Chase Elliott. You have Danny Suarez, who's from Mexico, who's in this series. So we've got these young, you know, up and coming winners on the racetrack that can wheel a race car that's resonating with our fan base. So right now, I believe, and this is maybe I'm not an expert to say this, but just my own eye test, I think the racing that we have right now on our racetracks is the best we've ever had.
You're also going through a lot of innovation. You know, one of the things that I admire from afar that the sport's doing is, you know, look, by losing those, you know, big names, by different TV dynamics over the last 15 years, you know, 10 years, there, you know, we are not at the apex of NASCAR as we sit here today in the way that we were. You know, what would you consider? You've been there 14 years. Sure. You're a fan. What is like the last real white hot kind of like era? Would you say?
I would say, you know, probably 07 to 09.
Yeah, like, you know, like, what was that? Was that when Nextel was that
Nextel came in 2004 with that season. Yep.
So, you know, what's really interesting is, you know, this is something I yell about with baseball. And I think they're finally starting, and I have empathy. Baseball is such, you know, when you start getting into 200 years and shit. But you guys are really innovating. Like, you guys are doing things that I kind of slightly am curious what the old school 30, 40, 50 year fan is thinking. Like, when you start changing sports, people, you know, heck, I'm a diehard football fan, and I weirdly don't want an 18 game schedule for one weird reason. It throws off me understanding how to calibrate stats. You know, like change is hard.
No.
But you guys have absolutely shown the willingness and have announced more changes to come. Like, innovate, you know, and from a business standpoint, I'm always innovate or die. That has not been a historic point of view of sports at all.
I agree.
And I feel like you guys, I'll let you talk, but outside of other leagues, most of basketball's innovation came from the ABA. You know, most of the innovation for the NFL came from the USFL or the XFL. Like, it usually comes when you see a pop of that. You guys are doing it to yourself.
We are. No, I think for us, we think it was important to do exactly that because fans, even existing fans and then new fans you're trying to get to watch our sport, we need to make sure that they are entertained. And we've been criticized about, hey, you're chasing the entertainment. You're chasing what the answer is yes. It needs to be compelling. And so we have created things like stage racing. So 3 different segments of our races. And then there are points you can get as a driver that help you get to our playoffs, right? So playoffs, new concept for us that we introduced. Segments, new concept that we introduced. Different, you know, the race car itself and what we're doing today and where we're going with the race car in the future.
What's been the reaction to that?
You know, it's interesting.
I mean, it's always pro and con. I'm curious. I don't know.
I promise I'll let Jill talk.
Please.
But I think I get excited. I think for
you
us,
grew up a fan. Jill didn't. This is appropriate.
No, but I had 3 cousins that drug me to the local dirt track, so they're all just mad at me still today that I have this job and they don't. So shout out to the crew.
Those 3.
So I think for us, a lot of the things that we have introduced, typically it's a 50-50, right? So you have half your fans that say, hey, I like that,
Yeah.
and half don't.
Yeah.
And so what we've been able to do, because the things, we do a lot of research and a lot of analytics and insights in terms of what we believe is going to work. And sometimes fans don't know what is going to work. They don't, they're kind of stuck in, hey, this is what I like.
Yeah, I mean,
and so it's change is hard.
If I listened to my customer, I would have made a faster horse.
Right.
And you guys know I'm always like, listen to the customer,
Yeah.
but then I always counter it with that. That's just the truth.
So for us, it's kind of in what happens, right? So we've been able to, in a lot of different things that we've done. So playoffs, more than 8 out of 10 of our fans say, hey, that's a great idea. It started at 50. Stage racing started at 50. Now we're well up over 80%. So we're always trying to listen to the fan and kind of iterate around it, but it's
Joe,
but we
before
have
we get
to
to this call, what's been the
changing.
most interesting thing the last year or two from a marketing standpoint? Just it could be completely anything. It could be a tactic you did on Instagram. It could be a brand coming to you that it's like just hot take. Some of the interesting stuff on the intersection of marketing and NASCAR.
A lot of what we work with you guys on. I mean, the explosion of content. Like we would never say that it was good that we had the retirement of all of those big stars. That clearly was not the case. But I think
Adversity leads to innovation.
Right. And given where the world is going, these young drivers are eager to prove themselves. They're out there. They're social natives.
Yep.
They are ready to take on the challenge. So we would have had a harder time, I think, adapting
OGs.
with
makes
those
sense.
veteran drivers that are like, you know what, I know what I need to
Yeah.
do, so I'm good.
This has been working
Yeah.
for me for 20 years.
Right.
Screw you, Jill.
Right.
Like you tweet. Get out of my face.
I'm busy. I have
Yeah.
a lot of
Yeah, I get it.
engagements. Yeah.
Who's this?
Beans and rice.
Is the name of the person? Okay.
With a Z. Beans with a Z.
You got it. Beans and rice with a Z. Understood.
Hello?
Beans, you're on the Ask Gary V show with the NASCAR crew.
Holy fuck.
Yeah.
I literally had my heart drop.
Yep. I'm glad you're on, Beans. I really am, and I love that you use a Z at the end of the Beans part. I think that's very clever. So, what's your question?
Wow, I can't even tell you how much that means to me. I'll get right to it. Thank you guys for having me, but my question is, with NASCAR, I'm really not really into that sport personally, but I'm wondering how the needs have changed over time, how maybe like some of the challenges that y'all faced in the 90s or the 2000s, what were they, and also what are the needs and challenges facing y'all today and how they differ?
Beans, real quick, just because I love this stuff. What sports, if any, are you into?
Basketball, but really I'm a musician, so I'm not a huge sports head, and I'm like really, really far from being a NASCAR fan, but with much respect, I have a lot of respect for y'all.
That's great. And why basketball in a world where you're so hard music? Did you play it? Is it like your friends? I'm just curious of the mapping of fandom.
Yeah, I think just culture, Jordans, which I'm now realizing you hate. But
Gonna get to that Kevin Love conversation.
yeah, playing like pickup games at school and playing in middle school on the team.
I appreciate it, Beans. So what are the challenges? Let's just break it down, and I'll DJ Beans' question because I'm curious for myself actually. When it was at its best moments, highest ratings dollars, white heat moment, and because I don't think you're at your down right now for especially when I look at it historically, but in comparison to your white heat moment, what were the challenges then, and what are the current challenges in your perspective?
Yeah, I think the challenges then, I think there were a lot of opportunities in the 90s, and there was a kind of an explosion of NASCAR. A lot of it had to do with kind of taking what was considered to be a Southern sport and expanding across the country. So
Yeah, Beans, just to give you context, like back in the day, this was like, oh, that's that country thing. Like, it was
Deep
like,
South.
there's a very, specific geographic. No, by the way, just to put into context, no different than lacrosse was a Northeast thing. Like, there's a lot of these things. Surfing, nobody's surfing in Oklahoma, and so like, there's a lot of that. But it was as a huge sport, it was unbelievably regional.
So I agree. So I think there were different challenges. There were media challenges because NASCAR races were on 12, 13 different
Networks.
And we
and
consolidated the media
all
deal,
the media
yeah.
rights in 01. But just the kind of the expansion in
Was
this
NASCAR's
country.
first national boost worldwide of sports? Like that's where I as a real young kid, and probably happening even before I was like, that's probably why I know Petty. Like it feels like worldwide of sports, or was that?
Well,
or
I think-
Daytona 500.
I think
or what?
Daytona 500.
Daytona
So the
500.
'79 Daytona 500. There
Big
was a
fight.
snowstorm.
Big
Oh right,
Big fight,
I remember
infield,
that.
punches being thrown,
That's
brothers
some good
involved.
shit.
It was like the seminal moment, and then we took
It made
off
the evening
from there.
news
Yes.
from everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so then
America's
you
like,
had-
wait,
then here
those
is
fuckers
like,
fight on the
yeah.
track.
No, and it was the
And
first.
yeah.
It was the first live broadcast as well.
Got
So
it.
a lot of things came together.
Was the fight staged?
No,
It
fight
was
was
not.
That would have been way better.
These
Our
guys are
drivers,
just- they were
our
just
drivers
pissed.
get pissed.
I get
at
it.
each other.
I know.
They put the helmet on,
But
and
they
the
don't
brain
ju-
leaks out
Actually,
the
yes,
side.
they do. They still fucking jump out and throw their helmet at each other.
yeah.
Like
Yeah.
Tony Stewart was great for that
Yeah,
stuff.
really, really good.
Well, he was angry a lot.
Yeah, I mean that's how I rolled. So that was John. What about now?
So I think now we've they've certainly got a number of challenges that we're overcoming. I think that the retirement thing was certainly,
Huge.
but I think just people's
Was the TV
ti-
switch right? Because Fox was your big play in that White Heat moment, and I don't recall, but
So it was Fox, So we had Fox, and then we had NBC, TNT, and then we had we switched back to ESPN.
Yep, right.
And then we are now Fox and NBC.
Got
so
it.
we have great media partners, but I think it's people's time. We need to make sure that we're relevant,
The
and
end.
so that's why the changes to the racing itself, because we want it to be as exciting as it can be. So we want to race at
The end.
the tracks that people want to go to see the racing that we want to see. We want close, competitive, side-by-side racing, guys mixing it up on the track, and in some cases off the track. So, but it's people's time is valuable.
Yeah.
You
There's
better
options.
and you better
It's
have
better
a
have-
compelling story to break through, because there's so much.
When I look at how much time is being spent watching my videos on YouTube, the first thing I always go to, I'm like, my God, 20 years ago that was going into TV shows, magazines, like that's one little like me,
Newspaper.
just me.
Yeah.
So
So
you start like thinking,
I agree. So you take a look at television ratings, right? So our TV ratings this year, all sports down 9%.
Yeah, all.
Just fewer people watching television.
yeah,
Right.
the end.
Wow.
Cord cutters, never cords, cord shavers. But they're just not watching TV.
Or a generation, my little guy, 6-year-old, would rather watch a baseball game on his iPad with updated
Yeah.
moments. He has it on, but he only watches it on the iPad because he likes to see all the data around the at bat. The game is literally on. He's not watching it because he's watching it in real time on the iPad.
And that's exact. So that's you're adapting to
Yes.
changing needs, and we do the same thing.
Love it.
Right. So for us, our ratings this year were +3. So are we back and killing it? We're coming
think you're
back,
onto
and we're onto something. And
If
it's
the
that
field
young
is down
drivers,
9,
and it's
Yeah.
and
I love
it's
it.
it's
and
it's
with
the
fewer
racing, it's the
people
drivers.
watching TV in general. So
So for
Beans,
us,
I
that's-
appreciate the
Nothing
call.
I also wanted to jump in and ask, does that compel you to try to convert maybe viewers who are obsessed with another sport, like hardcore basketball fans or hardcore soccer fans? Do you ever take the time to try to convert, or are you just really focused on the people who already like NASCAR?
The beans part of your question was just okay. The rice part of your question was amazing.
So I'll take this, and Jill can jump in. I
Thanks,
think we want to convert people who are where there's fertile ground, right? So if someone is just into basketball, listen, we have a ton of crossover with other sports. So believe it or not, there are folks that watch golf that also love NASCAR.
That makes a lot of sense to me.
The biggest crossover for us actually is the NFL. We have
That also makes sense.
that crossover for us is huge.
What about college football, or you don't score
College
that?
football
Yeah, I mean,
for
to me,
sure.
that feels super intuitive, right?
So-
The epicenter
Right.
Yeah.
of college football sits in a demo
in the southeast,
Yeah.
no question. So for us, we need to make sure
Is
that we're
beans?
I don't think so.
Okay, good.
that we're nurturing the folks that we have, because we want to keep that hardcore fan, but then we need to find this younger, more diverse fan, and
100%.
we're working hard to
Any
do
sport that isn't
Right.
thinking about youth and diversity
Right.
is looking to not win
Right.
2030.
And storylines matter, right? People want storylines.
And you want to see somebody that looks like you.
That's exactly
The
right.
best thing that happened to baseball was Jackie Robinson. I mean, so anyway, let's move on. It's really cool. It's really interesting to me because, also one thing that I think people are starting to understand because of esports and really, let's call it what it is, the growth of go ahead, the growth of proper football, soccer in America, it's really interesting to understand that. Good.
And storylines matter.
Hey, Beans.
Hey, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, great. Good.
It's the color there.
Watching esports and soccer grow, reminds us, like I said in the meeting, or actually in a prior meeting, the heavyweight champion of the world was the most famous athlete.
Yeah.
Horses were more famous than football players.
Yeah, I know.
Hello.
Steven?
Yes.
It's Gary Vaynerchuk. You're on the Ask Gary V show with the NASCAR crew.
Gary V.
Say hello
How
to
are you today?
I'm well. Say hello to the NASCAR crew.
Yeah. How you doing, Steve? How you doing, Jill?
Doing great. How are you, Steven?
Well, I think you made a great segue into my question, is talking about esports there, Gary V. So we got a driver right now, William Byron, driver of the number 24 car, who made his start in racing in e-racing, and you got a big event this week on NBC where you televised iRacing, e-racing for the very first time. What does the future of that look like for NASCAR?
That's a great question.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Joe.
Go ahead, Jill.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that the fact that William Byron sat on the pole of the Daytona 500 and did no racing until he did iRacing, which was our simulated esports product, is a story that hasn't been told. You could start doing that today.
Insane story.
You could be, and that's the pinnacle of
And
our
I'll
sport.
tell you why. I'm not sure there is another sport that will have that happen.
You can't go play Madden and then go play for the Jets. Well, maybe you could play for the Jets.
No, you're right. I mean, I wish I could. I'm not good enough at Madden either. No, that's right. That is actually remarkable. And actually, look, I think that soccer matters in America because of FIFA. I was there when the first FIFA Nintendo Sega Genesis game came out. And I bought it because I bought all video games back then. And none of my friends wanted to play because nobody gave a shit about soccer in 1994. And then slowly but surely, FIFA got bigger and bigger and bigger. But again, back to that point, you're not playing for Liverpool after being awesome. The fact that you guys have that might actually be the singular unlock.
Yeah.
Well, and I think the hardest thing for us is you can't go play NASCAR in the backyard, right? So
Back to the guy who said basketball, right?
Right.
I was thinking that.
Exactly. So this is a way that you can participate and understand how our sport works and get to be good at it without having to go to a racetrack. We want everybody to come to races.
Jill, I apologize.
Yeah.
Did you guys think that was going to happen when you first rolled out the program? Or was that even too big of a leap for you guys that somebody's going to sit at home, get great at this, and then actually be a fucking player?
Well, I don't think we could have never scripted that ourselves. We get accused of scripting a lot of things.
Did you believe that was going to happen?
No.
I
no
didn't
way.
either.
No way.
I did not. But
Not
Because it just-
and he's driving Jeff Gordon's car. This kid, William Byron, who was doing nothing at age 15, picked
Nothing
up
in the
iRacing.
sport. I'm sure he was
Nothing
a
in the
nice,
sport.
productive
Yeah,
15-year-old.
he's
I'm
a great
kidding.
kid. And he's driving one of the most iconic cars at the highest level. And so I think that the more people that understand and get exposed to NASCAR through iRacing.
Joe, I'll be very honest with you. I'm not sure I made the connection point to the question. Stephen, thank you for asking. I actually think that's the complete unlock. It's crazy. That will capture the imagination of an enormous amount of girls and boys that are the only place you can go from video game to actual profession is NASCAR.
Yeah.
I actually think it's true.
Well, I think that the other component to that too, and Jill alluded to it, you can't go in the backyard and do it. But you can do it online, and you can do iRacing, and it is incredible simulated racing.
Well, clearly that's the
it's-
point that I didn't make the connection on, which is you got the product is so good
That's right.
that the mapping of being great at it maps enough to real life. That's nuts.
Well, I think the nice thing about it too is car racing is expensive. And so you can figure out early and often whether you're good at it or not. So you're not spending, tens of thousands
I've always
of
thought
dollars.
that this was hockey's biggest issue. It's expensive to be in youth hockey, which eliminates a lot of great athletes from ever getting into the pipe.
Yeah, and the fact that that NBC is going to broadcast it, I mean, that's going to be huge exposure for it. I mean, that's Steven's question is that, the fact that our media partners are taking this component of NASCAR seriously is going to be even bigger and expose more people to it.
Steven, I appreciate the question.
Yep, no problem. Thank you very much.
Thanks for watching
Thank
the
you.
show. All right, let's get one more in. That was a great question.
Yeah, it was really good.
I really got to tell you, I think there's something real there. Like, I think that's something that you have that is so much of an advantage compared to any other sport.
I agree. Well, I think the other thing too is the people that do iRacing, they're absolutely nuts about it, and that's the cool thing.
Yeah, the passion.
Guitars ruin lives.
Excuse me?
Guitars ruin lives. But he plays guitar.
This is Josh.
Josh, it's Gary Vaynerchuk. You're on the Ask Gary V show.
Okay, it's happening. Shit.
It's
All right, thanks. Let's do this. What's up, Gary?
Things are good. Please say hello to Steve and Jill.
Hello, Steve and Jill. I'm doing my best to hear you. It's a little quiet, but I'll bear
Awesome.
with it. Thank you, guys.
No worries. What's your question?
So the question, as I put it forth in the comments there, was I think it's interesting looking at sponsorship as something, as a way. I'm no huge NASCAR fan, so I'm not posing here, but at least, everybody's familiar with the concept of the patches being on them and all that stuff. And I imagine there's a lot that has gone into that as far as drivers and their promoters, their managers, marketing and using that as a cross-pollination thing culturally and business-wise, of course, trying to drive business. And I think it's interesting looking at that compared to influencer culture and all the things that you talk about as far as DMing and whether you're looking at it from the business angle of a business using influencers to promote their agenda or vice versa. I think that's fascinating. So I'm curious if your guests could speak a little bit to that kind of model, and if you could speak to how that relates to what influencers should be doing today.
Well, I think for our drivers, I mean, the sponsors can be in the field of play. The sponsors are their personal partners. So it's not slapping a logo on a uniform or getting a personal services agreement. They are in the fabric of what makes these drivers tick. So I think for us, it's, we've got to pay attention to that. But I think where we also kind of struggle a little bit.
Some of the sponsors are actually integrated into the product, but some aren't, right?
No, they aren't. But they are, so
like the M&M's
right.
car, the most integrated could be is he or she's eating the M&Ms during the race.
Yeah, which may happen.
Yeah.
Dick Trickle used to have candy in his car, right? We know the Dick Trickle story. But your brand is on the car. Your brand is on the field. Very few brands are on the field.
And even the NBA, which has gone progressive. Yeah. Obviously, soccer in Europe is probably the only comp.
Right.
The NBA has been, that little logo in the top left is really tipping your toe.
Right.
In comparison to your point, which even soccer, which is at its scale, a car is much bigger than a jersey.
Well, and I think the other thing is our fans, they're passionate and they're trained. They expect sponsorship. They want to wear the jacket with the huge M&M's logo on it, and so that makes our sport even more valuable.
I assume just because I buy things at garage sales and sell them, knowing that M&M culture and collecting is real, I assume some people become fan of the driver because of M&Ms.
Oh, absolutely. No Especially, well, think about your 5-year-old example. Kids like Kyle Busch because he drives the M&M's car, and then they grow up to be Kyle Busch fans. The Candyman.
Budweiser and Dale, like that was, that mattered.
It was a really good brand fit there.
Yeah, that was a real good one. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, look, I think that what people don't realize is this is a huge advantage for NASCAR in a couple different ways, in my opinion. But where it really gets interesting is I think almost every human is going to do a sponsored deal in 2040. I think by the year 2040, most humans in our society are going to be in a place where they'll do some sort of commercial transaction through them. Because I think technology will advance enough that, my dream for my brands is to actually get the alpha mom who has 212 followers on Instagram, but she influences 7 people on her block or at school. And basically, I want to give her a free bottle of wine. That that's what she is worth to my business. But I wish I could do that now. Like there's a lot of dollars that go into the people finding that there's not infrastructure.
Right.
But that's where I think it's crazy. I think it's not out of the question that the dynamics we see in NASCAR actually translate to people driving in real life. That if you told me by 2060 everybody's car was sponsored out, I'd be like, I understand. You know, they're not going to get the kind of numbers that all the eyeballs that the racers get, but I think it's really cool, and I think there's a lot of clever bridges that could be built.
Absolutely.
I appreciate the question.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Gary. I need to take one moment and just say thank you. I discovered you about 2 months ago and deal with a lot. I was watching your interview with Mr. Lowe the other day, and I deal with a lot of things that he has talked about, and I want to tell you that literally listening to you and your podcast daily has done more for me than any pill or any other way that I've had to medicate as far as getting my ass going and being enthusiastic about life. And I'm wearing your shoes, and I got your hoodie. Thank you.
You're an amazing dude. Thank you. You can't imagine. You know, you can keep the shoes and hoodies. You can return. That sentence meant the world to me. Thank you, brother.
Thank you. Bye bye.
You have something to say about the Kevin Love podcast. I've been dying since our business meeting and now in the podcast.
Yes, well, I mean, I think it's more lighthearted, a more lighthearted piece of the Kevin Love.
What was it?
I took offense to your comment that all Warriors fans are
bandwagon?
the bandwagon
Are you a real
Silicon
Warrior
Valley
fan?
types that.
Are you a real Warriors fan?
I am a real Warriors fan. Run TMC.
Yep. Listen,
Tim, Mitch, and Chris.
Yes, listen, there are real Warrior fans.
Yeah.
Not all are, but the stunning amount of percentage of bandwagon Warrior fans is extraordinary.
Well,
and it's not the kids who get inspired at 6, 7. What am I going to do there? I'm actually talking about the
courtside
hundreds.
seats.
Yeah, forget about the richest people in Silicon Valley, and they can buy it, and they're completely full of shit, and they like the Lakers 10 years earlier or whatever. You know, as fans, I don't even know most of them well enough to know as humans. I'm talking about the masses that are sitting in 12 rows back, who are also quite well off, that I actually fully know. The hundreds of them that I met during my 2006, 7, 8, 9 years, those years in Silicon Valley, every week, every other week, every month, and being a sports fan and wanting to talk about things besides nerd tech in 2007, maybe you could find a San Francisco Giants fan because they were playing well, but literally when I would say things like, what do you think of Monty Ellis? They were like, who's that? And then I was like, well, what about the Warriors? And they're like, who are they?
Yeah.
And I was like, the Golden State Warriors are here. And they're like, they are?
Just so you know, Gary was so passionate about his lack of knowledge of any true Warriors fans that he wanted the Cavs to win that series, and he was excited, even though he's not a Cavs fan.
That actually that wasn't it. I'm sorry, you missed the nuance. It's that I hate Michael Jordan so much that I've been rooting for LeBron since he was a high school player.
I did miss that.
Yeah,
Yes.
And if tomorrow there's hype around a new 15-year-old. That person will immediately become somebody I adore and hope wins 7 championships so they can be the number one.
The
so
next
Jordan could be not the next above. Like to me, like Anthony Davis, it is literally Knicks and then LeBron to win as many rings as possible because I just hate Michael Jordan that much. I genuinely do. Final points that we didn't get to for both of you. Jill?
I would say give NASCAR a try. What you're going to see is huge competition, backstories, passion, drama, and you've got a group of drivers that's really compelling to watch and
actually, I want to ask you this. You just said it, and I saw this in my. I see a big crossover. I've had a lot of friends through the years that I grew up like wrestling, really get into NASCAR because what you just said, stories. Yeah. There's some real, like every sport has them,
right?
But there's so much tradition in NASCAR that it's a second or third generation kid, or B, it's the first Mexican American to do it. It's the first Asian American, it's the first female. Like there's so much tradition that either you're part of the establishment or you're breaking ground into the establishment, and that always makes for compelling stories.
Yes, and with the wide swath of drivers we have, they're relatable. So I think you can find a driver that you look at and say, that
looks
guy
like
seems
me.
cool. He likes the kind of music I like. He had the same upbringing I had.
Including one of the only major sports, if not the only major sports, that is a place where we will see females play at the compete at the highest level.
Same level, absolutely.
Which
I think
is
that-
important.
yeah.
Oh, India, you like that?
I do.
You're very
I think that-
woke, India. You're very woke. So woke. You're just
She's
gonna
moving to
woke-
Portland.
you're
You
just
have
gonna
to be woke.
You're just gonna woke your way to Portland, aren't you?
I think the cool thing about it too is our guys, by and large, our guys aren't prima donnas. They're authentic to who they are.
Oh, they definitely have
And
that
they-
hockey DNA, right? Like
Yeah,
that's
so-
everybody always talks about NASCAR. And hockey
But I have a
players.
theory. I have a theory about that.
Go ahead.
My theory about that is these guys. So you're 17 years old, and you
Yep.
want to ask this girl to go to the prom.
Go ahead.
You're a national karting champion.
Yes.
She is going to go with the backup tight end to the prom
100,000%.
versus you.
100%.
And so you don't
Every time.
Every time. And so you have to stay grounded, and that's what these guys are. They are grounded, and they were
I
able
actually think
to grow as
NASCAR,
part of
hockey,
it.
and some degree baseball's biggest problem is sometimes they stay too grounded.
That's
I really
fair.
do.
Yeah.
You know, I think, you know, they think of storytelling or putting out content as showboating instead of as sharing information.
Yeah.
I was, you know,
Yeah.
there's been a lot of guys that have
That's
been able
fair.
to break through, and I'm like, this is not showboating.
Right.
Then
That's what you need
educate
to do.
people how to
Right.
change a tire. Like you know.
Yeah.
But you'll even see that when they talk about, success that they have, and they'll say they thank everyone else, but it's not like, hey, I kicked ass today. I was
Yeah.
No,
was
it's the
best
guys back at the
back
shop.
at the shop, or the crew. Hey, the
Always.
crew guys
Always.
made
By
great
the way,
pit
that's
stop.
one
or-
of the more fascinating parts of the sport. I mean, like the pit, that crew matters.
They do.
Like
Yeah.
that gets into like my favorite. Like I've always used the offensive line quarterback analogy
Yeah.
with the pit and driver.
Yeah.
And the driver's gonna get all the headlines.
Right.
But like the offensive line really matters.
Yeah.
Pit crew really matters.
Really matters.
Really
It's
matters.
real, and they're tremendous athletes, and it's phenomenal. It's like
I think the pit crews are better athletes, like net athletes than the drivers. Like net, like if you just think about like
no question.
right?
No,
like
you
when I
get a
look,
ton of-
this
ton
is
of,
common sense
you know,
debate. I
Yeah.
could be wrong,
college
but when I
football
look at them, like,
players and
yeah, they're like they've got like
They're jacking up a 3,500-pound car. They're running around,
Yeah.
changing tires in
and they're
10
fucking
seconds.
jumping over,
It's-
sliding through. It's like every second matters.
Right. So,
it does.
Yep. I appreciate you guys being on the show.
thanks for
It's
having
awesome.
us.
Thanks
Thank
for
you.
having
us.
Appreciate it.
Thank you,
Good luck, India.
Thank you.
India. Any parting shots?
No, I think I've said everything I need to say.
You have been. You've been crushing content.
I've been truly trying, yeah.
You're
I learned
amazing.
from the best.
It's true.
Oh.
The king. Thanks for listening.
Oh, we have a new nickname.
On this episode, we wish India the Great goodbye, and we talk NASCAR. That was awesome.